Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen deputies, progress without effort is an illusion. One risks being in a better world only to have it destroyed. Progress cannot be taken for granted. Likewise, maintaining what has been achieved is not a given. Someone has to take responsibility for it. Right now, this is as important as it has ever been. We are at a pivotal moment in history in our country and our continent. The world is changing with a speed and magnitude that is unprecedented, geopolitically, socially, technologically, and ecologically. It is a time of upheaval. Yes, we are witnessing a fundamental event that is making history at this very moment. Historical alliances, the global system of political cooperation, all of this is being questioned, disrupted, and just 80 years after the end of the Second World War, 80 years after the Allies, especially the American troops, liberated us, an act of liberation that we commemorate every year throughout the country and Europe. Gratitude and deep appreciation. Last year I was together with Their Royal Highnesses, the Grand Duchess and the Grand Duke in Auschwitz. Millions of people were brutally murdered there, and in other camps. Even 8 years later, the shock remains indescribable. The shock that not only provokes thought but compels us to take action. Memory is more than recalling what one once was. It is understanding, more than just learning from history. It is about grasping the lessons. What happens when we allow hatred and division to take hold? If we tried to work, we would have had it already. A beacon for our world, freedom, democracy, equality, an impetus in the face of violence. In front of the actions of the word, from the word, thought, filled with thought into the rule of law. This memory is yet another lesson, the steadfast hope. It reminded one of the end of the Second World War. Yet the worst chapter of the last century is named above. Night is the darkest just before tomorrow. At the same time, hope is neither naive nor optimistic. Hope is a feeling, a conviction, even a certainty that despite everything realism, something better lies ahead of us than what lies behind us. And hope, above all, it is an incentive, a motivation to realize the potential of a better future. This government does not ignore the upheavals of our time. We want to seize them as valuable opportunities to make progress, to shape our future. We are all actively working on this together, with pride in our nation, with confidence in our capacities, and we convince the world. The world around us can change. With fundamental values remaining under development, especially in uncertain times, we need a policy that is in tune with the people, a responsible, centrist policy with a steady hand and a clear compass. Set ambitious goals, an effective economic policy that guarantees prosperity and a strong welfare state. A forward-looking social policy that strengthens justice and reduces poverty. An ambitious energy policy that expands renewable resources and addresses climate change. A modern social policy that strengthens rights and secures freedoms. We have made progress on all of these points. What were once promises have not remained just promises. They have become reality. We promised strength, and this government is delivering. Since January, people have had significantly more money in their pockets compared to 2023. The tax burden for a higher earner is lower than it was in 2023. A low earner only loses a small fraction of what it was in 2023. A single person earning $50,000 a year keeps about $1,000 more of their pay. But those earning less see the greatest percentage benefit. in benefit. So this is not a tax cut that is regressive, it is socially progressive. It helps those people the most who are most burdened by taxes. We promised a targeted social policy, and this government delivers. If one raises a tax, today there is a high unemployment benefit, a generous allocation for failure, a high-wage subsidy. For example, someone with a family of 4 receives significant assistance, such as the person who has a family of 4 receives substantial support. Altogether, this means that a family of 4, with access to these benefits, can have up to €2,500 more in their pocket. Beyond that, we have achieved the tax credit for larger families. And the Minister of Housing is now introduced single-parent status as a criterion to make access to housing affordable. In Luxembourg, housing is a social necessity. We want everyone to have access to decent housing. That's why we're simplifying the process for rent subsidies, so that people who need them can actually get them. We have automated processes, moving away from non-recourse applications, so people automatically receive the support they're entitled to. At the start of this year, over 11,000 people received energy and living allowances automatically without having to apply. And another 20,000 forms were pre-filled and sent out proactively. This is concrete poverty reduction. All these measures are the start of the action plan for poverty reduction, which the Family Minister will present later this year. A comprehensive strategy is important. People in precarious situations don't need paperwork. They need help. Concrete help. Our decisions do exactly that. It is a policy of social justice, not of a cold heart, as some unjustly accuse this government of. We promised a high-performing economy, and this government is delivering. Through tax relief, high investments, and the reduction of bureaucratic hurdles, the economy is picking up again. In 2022 and 2023, Luxembourg was in a recession. In 2024, the first year of this government, we were back in the positive. This year, the state is projected to grow by 2.5%. Creating more jobs again, the state projects around 2% growth next year, just as much as in 2024. These are not just numbers. These are salaries, personal dreams that become financially possible. Revenues that allow the state to pursue strong social policies and vital investments in our future. We promised momentum in housing. This government is delivering on that. Through partial unemployment schemes, targeted tax measures, and a public housing purchase program worth €500 million, we overcame the acute crisis in construction. We have implemented a coherent policy that builds, invests, buys, supports, and does not hold back. As a result, we are seeing signs of a turnaround in the market. The number of transactions for existing properties has doubled over the past year, with some even seeing a near celebration. The number of loans granted by banks is also increasing. This is a confirmation of this government's policy. The housing market is gaining new momentum. That was its goal. This helps people secure a home. This helps people who work in construction and in the trades. We are now committed to building more in the Isaiah area. For this, we have introduced a paradigm shift in the procedures. This is being implemented day by day in reality. The effects of this policy, of course, do not happen overnight, but in the medium term, they will create more living space and make housing in Luxembourg more affordable. We have promised to expand renewable energies, and this government is delivering. 2024 was a record year for new PV installations. 8,000 systems have been connected to the grid. That is green electricity, bringing us to over 30,000. To keep that momentum, we have submitted a bill to enable pre-financing of PV installations. And for larger PV systems at businesses and farms, we have provided financial support through 3 tenders. Action on purchasing power, on fighting poverty, on the economy, on housing, and on renewable energies. Examples of how my new policies with new emphases bear fruit. A policy that listens to people, addresses their concerns, and delivers on promises. But we are not content to rest on what has already been achieved. We are looking ahead. We want to prepare Luxembourg for the future, with an ambitious policy that is implemented as a whole. The government remains true every day with concrete milestones. The situation here and in the world demands this from us. The challenges ahead of us will not resolve themselves. But with courage and diligence, we can turn things around. We are the masters of our own destiny. We are writing our own future. Mr. President, the future is being shaped in these times, especially when it comes to security. And in the end, peace in Europe will be determined for the coming period. Even if the situation in Ukraine is deadlocked, but it is a war that binds us. We cannot be indifferent to Ukraine, and we are not indifferent. For over 3 years, Ukrainians have been fighting for freedom, constantly, and also for us. They are demanding our support until a just and lasting peace is achieved. Because this is about more than just peace in Ukraine. It is about peace in Europe. If the Russian president sees that he can achieve his goals through force, then he will not stop in Ukraine, just as he did not stop in Georgia or in Crimea. Other countries will then be next. And the entire international order, which is based on freedom and prosperity, is also at risk, especially the respect for law, for international law, which has always been the best protection for small countries throughout history, so that they do not have to endure attacks from the more powerful. We have learned, sometimes in a hard way, that real security comes from being part of a broader alliance. That is exactly why, since the Second World War, the European Union and NATO have come into existence. These organizations guarantee peace. By carrying out joint missions abroad, NATO guarantees our security to this day. Today, I especially want to express my gratitude and respect to our soldiers and everyone in the armed forces for their service. From our country, within NATO, the greatest pillar of NATO has been and remains the Americans. We want to maintain the partnership and friendship between Europeans and Americans. But the current American president leaves little doubt that, in the coming years, America will primarily look after its own interests, and may even choose a completely different path than before. At the same time, the danger posed by Russia is real. This is a new reality, a fundamental break in the recent history of our continent. The suffering is great because of this, both at home and abroad. This is a major challenge. But we cannot bury our heads in the sand and simply surrender to the situation. In this situation, we simply have to face reality, work, and get involved. The solution must lie in a more independent Europe. A strong Luxembourg can only exist within a strong Europe. Prosperity, security, and democracy in Luxembourg are closely linked to a united and self-confident Europe, and it is time for Europe to take responsibility for its own security. The desire for peace lies at the very origin of the European idea. The goal remains the same today. Peace, peace. Always peace, never war. Investments in security are not for war, but for peace. This is not the silence of Europe's downfall. It is the hour of European renewal. No matter how things proceed in Ukraine, the lesson is clear. The lesson is clear. The best deterrent against aggression is strength, and we find that strength in unity. The European Union has already taken an important step, but more than just an alliance, it must become a pillar to which we also contribute. A year ago, when I first announced here that we are fully committed to achieving the important NATO goal of investing at least 2% of our national resources in security by the year 2030, given the increasingly complex international situation, the ongoing war in Ukraine, and the rapidly changing policies in America, it became clear to all other allies, just as it is now clear to us, that this must and will happen. After discussions with all parties, we decided not to wait until 2030, but to achieve the 2% NATO target by the end of this year. I already have. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also said in a conversation yesterday about the decision, as reported in Bild, and the Defense Minister will inform the responsible committee about how and in what capacities we will invest over the coming years. The budget that we will present in October will then anchor the new target in the financial planning for the coming years. The new trajectory will position us as a reliable partner and security provider. Our two other neighbors and most of our allies are already meeting this target today. Within NATO, many countries are proposing a target well above 2%. If, due to the exceptional geopolitical situation, consensus is reached at the NATO summit in June to raise the bar, then we too, Saad, as a trustworthy allied partner, will go along with it. Luxembourg wants to and will take on its responsibility and make its contribution. And yet, this remains a difficult step. But a responsible government cannot neglect security. Without security, there can be no peace. And that is why I am glad that in my discussions, a large majority of the parties were aware of this responsibility. I want to thank all the parliamentary groups here for the constructive and respectful discussions we had about the major security issues facing our country. I am proud of our country that, on this complex subject, we are able to have a broad national consensus. That is important because the impact will extend far beyond the next elections. And that is a strong signal to our allies and to all those who question security and peace in Europe. But this financial effort cannot come at the expense of our social policy. We cannot play one off against the other. The challenge of security comes on top of that. However, the other challenges do not simply disappear. The funding for higher defense spending must come from our own resources. First, through the public budget itself, in particular by introducing a defense bond, a public loan dedicated to national security, open to contributions from private investors. Second, by redefining investment spending priorities. Future budgets will need to reflect the reality that not all infrastructure projects proceed simultaneously. And third, by mobilizing extra budgetary financial resources, notably through the creation of a national fund managed via the SNCI aimed at financing dual-use investments, projects that serve both military and civilian purposes. We must be willing to invest in peace. If we fail to do so, we risk paying a far higher price, the price of our freedom. And we risk undermining the confidence of our allies. Since this will require substantial structural investment, such spending must serve the interests of the country and its people by contributing both to Luxembourg's growth and resilience. That's why we need an economic strategy that supports this military effort, a strategy based on our strengths, particularly in the areas of satellites and cybersecurity. In this context, I would like to thank all those involved for their proactive suggestions, especially through initiatives such as Lux for Defense. In the satellite sector in particular, Luxembourg possesses solid expertise and a well-established international reputation. The state works closely with SES in this domain. Every day, our allies rely on satellite communication capabilities based on Luxembourgish expertise, including the GovSat-1 satellite and medium Earth Global Services. Therefore, the government has decided to launch a second communications satellite for military purposes. With the active support of the government, SES has a leading role in a crucial European program, IRIS-2. Under this initiative, 290 new satellites will provide highly secure communications across Europe for both military and civilian purposes. Luxembourg's first Earth observation satellite will be launched this summer. In this context, our defense and our allies should receive the first images for military use by the end of the year. All these projects are of major strategic importance for the alliance as a whole. We strengthen our economy, deepen our cooperation with allies, and reinforce our partnership with a historic Luxembourg company, SES. But the benefits must extend beyond a single sector. The Ministers for Foreign Affairs, the Economy and Defense are actively supporting Luxembourgish companies in integrating into the supply chains of the European defense industry. Through these efforts and targeted financial support, we aim to create an ecosystem of companies with activities that can be used for both civilian and military purposes. Beyond the economic dimension, we must also consider security in a broader sense, one that extends beyond the framework of our armed forces. It is about strengthening the resilience of our society as a whole in the face of a wide range of potential crises. We all remember the pandemic, the floods, the cyber attacks, and more recently, the power outages in Spain and Portugal. What all these events have in common is that they posed a sudden threat to the overall functioning of society. We do not yet know what challenges lie ahead, but we do know that they will come. And we must be prepared and ready. That is why we will be presenting the first National Resilience Strategy later this year, accompanied by a targeted information campaign. Last week, I travelled to Finland, a pioneering country in this field, to gain first-hand insight into the types of solutions that could be considered for Luxembourg. The Finnish approach, which engages the whole of society, is particularly inspiring. The HCPN, the High Commission for National Protection, which reports directly to the Prime Minister, has already developed detailed plans to anticipate and respond to all types of emergency situations. This new strategy will engage our society as a whole. True resilience requires coordinated action at both national and local levels. It brings together civil and military services, public institutions, and private actors. It is grounded in an all-risks approach and coherent crisis management. Even in times of emergency, the essential functions of our society, our state, and our economy must continue to operate. This holistic approach lies at the core of our national resilience strategy. We are currently making a comprehensive inventory of what we already have in place, where there is room for improvement, and how it can be done. Allow me to mention two concrete measures that are already planned. The Minister for Home Affairs will establish a new platform within the CGDIS under the name RESC-LU. This platform will enable the CGDIS, municipalities, and private actors to support one another with specialized personnel and equipment in the event of a disaster. The Minister Delegate to the Prime Minister for Connectivity is working to modernize the communication systems used by our security and emergency services. This will open up new possibilities, such as accessing construction plans, receiving drone-transmitted images, and sharing vital patient data. However, a resilient society begins with a shared awareness among all citizens. It is a collective responsibility rooted in trust and social cohesion. And I am confident that this cohesion exists in Luxembourg. This responsibility must be taken on seriously and calmly by each and every one of us. We want everyone to play an active and proactive part in strengthening the resilience of our society. Mr. President, the world is becoming more complex. We are experiencing a time of fundamental change. War, protectionism, and the questioning of democracy are on the rise. The post-Cold War international order is facing significant challenges. The international community now stands at a crossroads, confronted with two opposing paths. On the one hand, division, instability, and uncertainty. On the other, cooperation, stability, and progress. Luxembourg will always stand on the side of diplomacy and dialogue, of multilateralism and cooperation, because that is where peace and prosperity flourish. But in this evolving context, new questions arise for Luxembourg, in particular the question of our sovereignty. The pandemic, the energy crisis, and the war in Ukraine have shown us that an excessive dependence on others can be a source of vulnerability. To be sovereign does not mean looking only after oneself, nor does it mean being left to face the world alone. Being sovereign means being self-confident. It means taking one's own decisions. To be sovereign is to be free. A sovereign Europe and a sovereign Luxembourg can only exist within a sovereign Europe. Our openness to Europe is the foundation of our social and economic success. It is a Luxembourg tradition to be at the forefront of European progress. The presence in Luxembourg last week of the presidents of the European institutions who came to mark Europe Day at our invitation is a powerful symbol of that commitment. If we want to shape our future, then that future must be European. Our future and that of Europe cannot be separated. The future of Luxembourg and the future of Europe are inseparable. Luxembourg's challenges are also Europe's challenges, and European solutions are Luxembourg's solutions. A sovereign Europe must be able to guarantee its own security and make its voice heard on the international stage. And Luxembourg must play its part. A sovereign Europe must safeguard its strategic sectors and produce its own energy. And Luxembourg must play its part. A sovereign Europe must strengthen the single market and lead the way in technological innovation. And Luxembourg must play its part. Such a sovereign Europe will be able to engage on equal terms with other major powers, whether it be the United States, China, or other BRICS countries. Two sectors that are essential to our sovereignty and where Luxembourg's interests and those of Europe converge are agriculture and industry. For this government, strengthening agriculture is a priority. That is why farmers see us as a partner with whom challenges are addressed at the table through dialogue, not on the streets through protests. Agriculture is a pillar of our society and our economy. And it is essential to preserving our capacity to produce our own food. Our aim is to ensure a local production of high-quality food. That is why the Minister of Agriculture has introduced a new financial support scheme to encourage the construction of larger greenhouses for fruit and vegetables. The Ministries of Agriculture and for the Environment are now working closely together to implement several of these projects in the short term. By engaging in direct dialogue with farmers, we have taken concrete steps to simplify their work, particularly regarding the employment of seasonal workers. This dialogue is continuing with young farmers. We want to preserve the entrepreneurial spirit and make it easier for farms and wine-growing businesses to be handed down from one generation to the next. At the European level, is the direction the same? Tomorrow, Luxembourg's European Commissioner, Christoph Hansen, will propose a major simplification of agricultural regulations across the European Union. We fully support this approach. Our farmers should be in the fields, not in the office. It is time to cut unnecessary red tape. But serving the common interests of Luxembourg and Europe also means forging partnerships with other regions. Luxembourg needs export markets, especially at a time when new barriers are being erected in various parts of the world. And that is why Luxembourg will vote in favor of the Mercosur agreement. The final version of the agreement provides stronger guarantees that our markets will not be flooded and that our health and environment standards will not be compromised. Thanks to the efforts of a number of agricultural ministers, including the one from Luxembourg, we will closely monitor the effects of the agreement in consultation with the agricultural sector. And should our meat farmers' local production start to suffer from the agreement, we would of course seek ways to support them. This agreement brings many benefits for the economy. Tariffs will be reduced significantly, especially in the industrial sector. Industry is another strategic pillar of our sovereignty. This government is determined to ensure that Luxembourg remains a location of choice for industrial actors. Industry, and steel in particular, has shaped Luxembourg's history, and it will continue to shape its future. But European industry is currently facing serious challenges, not least due to high energy prices. That is why a strong industrial base, indeed a certain level of reindustrialization, can only be achieved through energy policy. Three political objectives converge in this effort: sovereignty and security of supply, economic competitiveness, reducing CO2 emissions. These objectives are not mutually exclusive. They are compatible, but the path to achieving them must be grounded in pragmatism. We will chart this course alongside industry, not in opposition to it. We should support industrial actors in their decarbonization efforts, not burden them with unrealistic demands. Industrial companies must be able to advance step by step, not be forced into drastic transitions overnight. That is also the spirit of the new European Clean Industrial Deal. This is also the spirit that underpins the new European Clean Industrial Deal. That is why we need targeted financial support and significant investment in our grid infrastructure. To this end, we have proposed a reform of the state aid law to better support industrial companies in their energy transition. And at the European level, we are advocating for a simplified legal framework for state aid. At the same time, current technologies do not allow all industries to shift entirely to electricity. That's why we welcome the establishment of the legal basis for a hydrogen network in Luxembourg. That is why we welcome the adoption of a legal basis for a hydrogen network in Luxembourg. Together with our neighboring countries, we are working to connect Luxembourg to the international hydrogen infrastructure. These measures are important and necessary, but they do not solve the problem of high energy prices in the short term. Our industry needs clean energy, but it also needs affordable energy. If we fail to get prices under control, there will be no one left to support in the transition. Industry will turn its back on Europe. This would be a serious blow to our sovereignty and to every household's electricity bill. Because given the pricing structure, every industrial departure directly affects consumer energy costs. Energy prices are critical for industry, for the economy, and for our social cohesion. The past few years have shown in very concrete terms the impact of high energy costs on households. Energy must remain affordable. That is why many European countries are now actively working to reduce energy prices over the long term. In Luxembourg, energy prices remain below the European average. This is both a social and economic strength, one that we must preserve. We want to stabilize electricity prices over the coming years without going back to a price cap. We are no longer in an energy crisis. We need sustainable solutions to ensure affordable energy prices and actively encourage the transition to electrification. Therefore, the state has decided to mobilize €150 million, funds that will directly benefit citizens and companies. On the one hand, the public budget will directly finance, as in Germany, part of the grid costs. This will bring significant relief to all customers. Current forecasts project electricity prices should fall next year, despite the end of the energy price cap. Current forecasts project electricity prices should fall next year, despite the end of the energy price cap. With this measure, we are providing targeted support for households, switching to electricity, thereby encouraging the ecological transition. Through the tripling of the energy allowance, our approach will also remain socially targeted. We are prioritizing support for those most affected by rising prices. In the medium term, ensuring energy prices that are both affordable and competitive will only be possible through a transition to renewable energy. The second pillar of our strategy. It is better for the environment, better for our sovereignty, and ultimately better for our wallets. That is why it remains a top priority for this government. Today, half of the electricity produced in the European Union already comes from renewable sources, and that share is increasing year after year in Luxembourg as well. To continue this trend, we are advancing our plan to pre-finance solar panels. The preparatory work has been completed, and in the coming weeks, we will incorporate the Council of State's comments. This will ensure that we are ready when the Parliament proceeds to vote on the bill. To ensure that the green transition is also socially just, we will be extending this support system to other climate bonus grants starting next year. Between now and the summer, the Minister of the Environment will be proposing further improvements as part of the Klimabonus Wonnen program for heat pumps and energy renovation. We also want to add a social component to the climate plan. This is a climate policy designed by citizens and for citizens, a policy that actively engages them. With this in mind, we have launched a broad consultation with all stakeholders and local authorities under the title Simple, Fast, Renewable. The name says it all. The aim is to simplify the regulations to speed up and increase the use of renewable energies. Too often today, we are standing in our own way. Instead of helping, procedures slow down the process. That's why this government is committed to significantly simplifying the rules. We need to streamline the system. Less bureaucracy means more sustainable energy, and therefore fewer emissions. Based on this process, the government has developed an ambitious catalogue of about 50 measures, half of which will already be in the legislative process by the end of the year. The details of these measures will be presented by the Ministers of Energy and the Environment, but I would like to highlight 4 key points. First, the positive impact of the dialogue itself. Discussions with the industry have revealed several discrepancies in the interpretation of technical regulations. These were resolved in true Luxembourgish fashion through quick and direct action. These were resolved in true Luxembourgish manner through quick changes. The changes provide greater planning certainty and show that real progress comes from speaking with and working alongside stakeholders on the ground. Secondly, procedures will be systematically simplified, shortened, and digitized to enable projects to be completed more quickly. This includes the introduction of de minimis thresholds, for which no formal authorization will be required. A simple notification will suffice. In general, deadlines will be shortened or introduced where none currently exist. The Minister of Justice is also working on implementing a fast-track procedure for appeals related to large-scale projects. At the same time, the Minister for Culture plans to simplify procedures for installing photovoltaic panels on protected buildings while ensuring their cultural identity is respected. The Ministry of the Environment will harmonize processes across all its agencies. From now on, large-scale projects will also automatically be granted the status of major public interest, allowing more efficient environmental procedures to be applied. These adjustments, among others, will enable the Ministry of the Environment to process large-scale projects in under 2 years. This exceeds the target set at European level. But we want to go even further. In newly designated acceleration zones, applications will be processed in under 1 year. While accelerating existing projects remains a top priority, we also want to explore new opportunities for photovoltaic and wind energy installations, always in balance with and respect of both humans and nature. That is our third key priority. As regards photovoltaics, we see significant potential along our motorway network. According to an independent study, up to 1,500 megawatts could be generated along these corridors. Even partially realizing this potential would produce clean energy for tens of thousands of households. To this end, several concrete projects will be launched in the coming months, including installations on noise barriers and the park and ride facility in Ljunglinster. In addition, the government will table new legislation allowing the installation of solar panels in the non-edificandi zone, the 25-meter strip beyond the motorway safety zone. When it comes to wind turbines, we will reduce the minimum distance requirements from roads and forests, aligning our regulations with those of neighboring countries. We will also want to permit the construction of taller, more efficient turbines that can generate more electricity. Technological progress makes these changes possible without compromising the safety of citizens or the environment. The fourth key point concerns the role of the state in leading by example. Today, all new public buildings are systematically designed with photovoltaic panels. Going forward, smaller projects will be bundled to speed up deployment on existing buildings. Public procurement rules will be adjusted accordingly to support this approach. At the municipal level, large-scale photovoltaic panel projects will become eligible for government financial support. This will promote the development of new installations on schools, sport arenas, and other communal buildings across the country. This package of measures represents a real turning point, a fundamental overhaul of the regulatory framework to allow a faster deployment of more renewable energies. To ensure that our network has the flexibility and security required to guarantee a reliable electricity supply at all times, the government will present a national storage strategy later this year. As part of this effort, a new subsidy will be introduced to support owners of photovoltaic panels in purchasing a battery storage system at a later stage. This will guarantee that the switch to electricity remains financially attractive. All these measures support the three objectives of our energy policy: increased sovereignty, increased competitiveness, and fewer emissions. They will strengthen Luxembourg for the future and leave a better world for our children. Mr. President, achieving these objectives is also important for the competitiveness of our entire economy, especially the energy-intensive data sector. And precisely the latter plays a key role in safeguarding Luxembourg's and Europe's sovereignty. We want to be pioneers in new technologies. If we do not have our own solutions for data and new technologies, we will continue to depend on other countries. Luxembourg should be known worldwide as a powerhouse in both finance and digital technologies. Stability and trust, two pillars of our financial center, are also crucial for positioning Luxembourg as a data hub. We are building on these and other strengths and putting innovation at the heart of our strategy. Innovation, human curiosity, and the quest for knowledge have always been the driving forces behind progress and continue to drive humanity forward. There is no better time than now to establish Luxembourg as a leading data hub. The amount of data being generated is growing exponentially. At the same time, rapid advances in artificial intelligence offer tremendous opportunities to use this data for the benefit of society. Whether in medicine, education, or autonomous driving. And against the backdrop of the new geopolitical landscape, it is more important than ever to know who controls data. Hence why the government is setting out a clear vision for consolidating Luxembourg's digital sovereignty. This vision is based on 3 new strategies: on data, artificial intelligence, and quantum technology. Together, they form a coherent and unique vision that is unrivaled in the world. A vision of Luxembourg as an international center for the secure and sovereign storage and valorization of sensitive data from all over Europe. A center based on an agile strategy that puts people at the center of progress and attracts data and talent from all over the world. To achieve this goal, we are investing in the necessary infrastructure, talent, and projects. Over the next 6 years, 3 billion euros from both public and private players will be mobilized for this purpose. In particular, AI, artificial intelligence, has become more important than ever. It is the transformative technology of the coming decades, with a potential for our future comparable to that of the Internet a couple of years ago. For a number of years now, we must not leave this technology solely to other countries and continents. That is why we cannot ignore this technology and leave it to other countries and continents. We want an AI based on trust and transparency, putting innovation at the service of humanity. A European artificial intelligence with a Luxembourgish touch. In this vision, AI is designed to assist mankind, not replace it. It actually helps people. It supports the machines. The person does not say, "It will do it for me," but rather, "It helps me to complete a task quickly." Control remains with the human. This vision is based on a coherent approach, with ecosystems centered around outstanding structures, featuring one of the first AI factories in the EU, a supercomputer designed for artificial intelligence applications and integrated into a European network, as well as the first quantum computer. By connecting data from different sources, we aim to create even greater added value. To achieve this, we are defining a harmonized standard for data that is accessible, reusable, and easy to find. This ecosystem could be further enhanced in the future by creating a deep tech lab. The goal of this new structure is to facilitate collaboration between academic and economic actors, with the aim of fostering research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. This will allow public-private partnerships and spin-offs to emerge, strengthening both our society and our economy, with new, innovative ideas that move our country forward. This dynamic will offer researchers from Luxembourg and around the world the opportunity to collaborate on innovation projects while also serving as an important lever for attracting top talent. As for local talent, starting in 2026, we will launch an AI Academy within the Digital Learning Hub, offering specialized training programs in artificial intelligence. To ensure the responsible use of these new technologies, we are in the process of implementing the European AI Act. This initiative establishes a harmonized framework at European level that promotes innovation while protecting citizens' rights. If we aim to become a hub for the whole of Europe, a pragmatic implementation of this framework is essential. Together, these elements will make it possible to apply artificial intelligence in the real world and to deliver tangible benefits for society and the economy. Because innovation cannot remain confined to the laboratory if it is to truly serve people and businesses. That is why we have identified a number of key projects and are working to implement new technologies into our businesses. One of these projects involves the development of an artificial intelligence model, a large language model, specifically trained on our national and European legislation, Humans still hold the pen, but AI can help make the drafting of legislation more efficient. In the long run, this could also serve as a starting point to help private individuals and businesses handle administrative procedures more easily. We also intend to use artificial intelligence within ADEM to better understand the skills job seekers possess and those in demand by businesses. This will allow us to offer more targeted training, tackle unemployment more effectively, and address shortages in specific sectors. And to bring this innovation and these ideas better into companies, the Minister of Research is revising the National Research Strategy and will present a new bill on the National Research Fund before the summer. We have also decided to increase support for SMEs wishing to invest in digitalization or artificial intelligence applications. And we are working with private stakeholders on a number of other measures to facilitate technology transfer to Luxembourg's SMEs. As it is often small and new companies that revolutionize a sector with an innovative idea, the Minister of Finance and the Minister of the Economy have introduced a new action plan to support startups. This will include SNCI funds amounting to €300 million. Innovation is the foundation of our progress. A modern Luxembourg must work tirelessly to remain at the forefront of new technologies. Innovation is not only the driving force behind the economy, it is also the foundation of social progress. The Internet has become the greatest repository of knowledge in human history. What once exceeded the capacity of the world's largest libraries now fits in our pockets, thanks to a simple smartphone. Yet, amid the excitement for these new opportunities, we must also learn to use them responsibly. Already too often, phones replace meetings, screens replace books, and headphones real conversations. The responsibility lies with all of us to make sure the digital world enhances rather than replaces real life, and that artificial intelligence remains a tool, not a substitute, for human intelligence. That is why we must prioritize our children. This new generation is growing up with the Internet and smartphones. They have never known a world without digital tools or social media. The consequences of this development are already being felt. We are witnessing increasingly pronounced behavioral issues, sleep disturbances, anxiety, and even depression among children. And from an early age, significant gaps in social and cognitive development. The latest report by the Ombudsman für Kinder- und Jugendliche is alarming. Not only are children spending more and more time in front of screens, but they are also exposed to increasingly violent and sexualized content, especially on social media platforms. We must protect our children from such content. This is part of their fundamental rights. We need to address this challenge at the European level, with regulations like the Digital Services Act. But the greatest challenge lies in the potential long-term impact of these developments on children's mental health. Mental health in general has become more fragile. The effects of the pandemic are still felt deeply. At the same time, we are seeing a rise in cases of autism and other forms of neurodiversity, such as dyslexia and attention deficit disorders. Mental health must no longer be treated as a taboo. It is a fundamental component of overall well-being. To enhance care for the most severe cases, we are increasing the capacity of juvenile psychiatric units by adding more beds. Above all, the Minister of Health and the Minister of Education have made prevention a top priority. By integrating this topic into health education in schools, by developing a new digital tool to make it easier to keep track each child throughout their school career, by increasing mental health first aid training, by improving children's screen-life balance through sports in schools and after-school care, and through clearer rules on smartphone use in schools. But school only covers part of the day. That is why we also want to raise awareness among parents, particularly through information campaigns and targeted conferences organized as part of parent forums. Because as parents, we must lead by example at home. During this year, in close consultation with those working in the field, we will explore new ways to help children grow up worry-free. We will not give up. We cannot give up. Our goal is a generation that is genuinely happy and does not just post happy pictures. This is a new facet of a modern society, one that we want to recognize and help shape. This is a new side of our modern society, one that we take seriously and will address with the dedication it deserves. The world is changing, not just internationally, but in very concrete ways. This can be seen in our daily lives and in the way we live together. Mr. President, we do not want to remain spectators of social change. We want to accompany and shape it. Our ambition is to pursue a modern social policy. This also applies to the tax system, labor law, and pensions, with targeted adjustments, not with revolutions, but with evolutions, in accordance with the spirit of our times. One objective is to promote a better work-life balance to accommodate all family structures. The state should not impose one family model over another. Every couple and family must be free to make their own choices. Our policies must respect them all. With regard to the tax system, the government is committed to proposing a single tax bracket. With individualization, every family model will be treated and taxed in the same way. This is first and foremost a question of equity. Preparations for this reform are progressing well, allowing the Minister of Finance to present various options to Parliament and the social partners in July. One option being considered could be a new tax class, close to the current 1A tax class, with an extended transitional phase for married or PAX taxpayers to ensure that they are not disadvantaged. With the same objective of achieving a better work-life balance, we are also revising our labor law. It's not about revolutionizing the system, but about making targeted adjustments that reflect the needs of our time. These are not top-down decisions, but the result of dialogue with our social partners. That is why the government regularly exchanges views with the social partners, as I did myself just a few days ago. This government stands for dialogue. All the policies I am presenting here today are evidence of this. We do not govern in isolation. We believe in dialogue with political parties on defense issues, with farmers for agriculture, with professionals on housing and renewable energies, with the whole population on pensions, and with the trade unions as regards labor law. Dialogue is not always easy, but listening respectfully and taking into account different points of view is essential. And that is what we do. Disagreement is part of the democratic process. Not every challenge is an attack. Not every criticism an opposition. It is precisely the ability to express differing opinions without fear of repression that distinguishes a democracy from a dictatorship. It is in this spirit that we continue to listen to trade unions and civil society on the issue of the right of assembly. This is a fundamental right in our democratic system. Therefore, this government will not legislate on this issue without prior consultation of trade unions and civil society. At the same time, dialogue does not necessarily imply co-decision on every point. The parliamentary majority has a responsibility, and it will be judged on its ability to shoulder it. That's what a democracy is all about, and rightly so. If we know who makes the decisions, we also know who bears the responsibility, for better or for worse. The majority is committed to implementing a modern social policy. In this context, we have proposed an adjustment to opening hours and work on Sundays. Allow me to put this proposal in the appropriate context. Sundays will not become ordinary working days. They will continue to be dedicated to family life and social, cultural, and sporting activities. At the same time, it is already possible to eat in a restaurant, go to a supermarket, or to take a bus on a Sunday. We are proposing nothing more and nothing less than to give greater flexibility to businesses that are already authorized to open on Sundays. Instead of limiting work to 4 hours, up to 8 hours will be allowed, not imposed. People working in these specific sectors will receive a 70% bonus. In doing so, we create more opportunities for employees, businesses, and society as a whole. It is not a step back, but a step forward, one that brings more choice and more freedom. The proposals by the Minister of the Economy on opening hours in the retail sector follow the same logic, to offer more options and more choices. But that does not mean that a clothing store will stay open until 10 p.m. This change is happening. It was discussed with the social partners, and these were far from superficial. They led to a link between certain aspects of opening hours and collective agreements. This is proof that we are listening. And it is also proof that collective agreements remain a central element of our labor law, as well as an essential lever for trade unions. However, we also note that the current system no longer reflects the different realities of our society and economy. Collective agreements must remain an attractive tool for both social partners. At the same time, agreements concluded at company level will be given an expanded role. They will make it possible to regulate aspects specific to the reality of each company and the needs of its employees. These changes are not intended to strengthen one side or weaken the other. The aim is to act in the interests of society as a whole, in line with modern politics. No matter what is said, whether it's to get more attention in the media or something like that, the government fully supports social dialogue and social partnership and has complete respect for the unions. This is why I announced in January that social roundtables will be held. Dialogue and exchange with the social partners are important to me, both as an individual and as Prime Minister. Together with the Ministers of Labour and of the Economy, we have met the social partners on several occasions over the last few months. In pairs or threes, by phone and in person. Our approach was to be objective, free from any external pressure. Our priority was dialogue, not media coverage. So it was about dialogue, not publicity. That was the aim of these social roundtables. And they have been successful. Despite a difficult start, the three partners have been able to come closer together, listen to each other, and engage in a dialogue based on mutual respect. The government wishes to continue this respectful exchange over the coming months, including within the institutions dedicated to social dialogue. In addition to these discussions, this year we will present the flexibilization of maternity leave and the introduction of part-time work for family reasons. The goal is to allow parents to spend more time with their children during the crucial first months and years of life. In a modern social policy, work and family life are not opposing forces. They go hand in hand. Every child should have the chance to grow up in a happy family. It is not the composition of the family that matters, but the quality of care the child receives. The reform of adoption law, presented by the Minister of Justice, is fully aligned with this child-centered approach. In addition to the growing diversity of family models, modern policy must also keep pace with changes in our life expectancy. We launched a wide-ranging consultation on the pension system in October. On behalf of the whole government, I would like to thank everyone for their contributions. All these perspectives are extremely useful. This issue has clearly generated real interest, which is a success in itself. It is the very expression of a vibrant democracy. This stage of the consultation proved very useful. The period of consultation was helpful, and now we must define the direction ahead. To this end, the Minister of Social Security will present her detailed proposals before the summer. But I would like to make 3 points already today. First, the pension system is a social achievement that we must preserve and guarantee for future generations. A strong, universal, public pension system must remain the central cornerstone of our retirement system. Second, the pension system is based on promises and trust in those promises. We will not make any changes for people who are already retired or about to retire, but we will continue to count student years as equivalent to years spent raising children. Third, the pension system is an insurance for old age, a safeguard that should allow every generation to look towards retirement with confidence and peace of mind. Many people have been retired for as long as they paid into the system. Today, the retirement period is almost as long as the contribution period. This situation is clearly no longer viable. In addition, with an average retirement age of around 60, Luxembourg has the lowest effective retirement age of all EU and OECD countries. This is why we will gradually increase the number of contribution years. The career length required to qualify for a pension will be extended by 3 months each year over a number of years. Unlike our neighboring countries, the legal retirement age will remain at 65. Thanks to this reform, we aim to ensure that the actual retirement age moves closer to that legal retirement age. To support this transition, we are also introducing the option of progressive retirement, a period during which a person has the choice to gradually work less while already receiving part of their pension. We will financially secure the system for the next 15 years. Through a fiscal contribution funded by revenues from an existing consumption tax. For example, half of the revenues from the CO2 tax earmarked for social measures could be used for this purpose. By maintaining the existing reserve so that it continues to generate as much return on investment as possible, and by upholding the reform adopted by Parliament in 2012, including the measures that come into force if expenditures exceed revenues. In addition to these key principles for the pension system, we would like to propose 2 further adjustments. We will introduce targeted social assistance for people at risk of old age poverty. And for those who are fortunate to have extra savings, we will make private third-pillar pensions more attractive, to encourage people to build up an additional safety net for their old age. I would like to reiterate that the broad debate on this subject has been very useful. It is a debate that needs to be revisited regularly to take account of ever-changing demographic and economic developments. This is because our pension system remains de facto dependent on our economic success. Mr. President, in an increasingly uncertain world, we must redouble our efforts to remain competitive and preserve our country's economic success. In an ocean of international instability, it is all the more important to control what we can control, to stay the course in calm waters, and to preserve, strengthen, and capitalize on the stability that is our strength. To strengthen our competitiveness, we need to breathe new life into entrepreneurship. and give our SMEs the space they need to thrive. That is why we will continue to simplify administrative procedures. By the end of the year, the Minister of the Economy will present a series of adjustments to the right of establishment. In addition, we are also planning to present a reform of the ITM to strengthen its consultative role. The emphasis will be on prevention, awareness raising, and support rather than sanctions. We also support efforts to reduce the administrative and regulatory burden on our businesses at European level. With the so-called omnibus proposals, for example, the European Commission intends to simplify the regulatory framework without neglecting the political objective of these texts. Better regulation does not mean no regulation. However, effective rules remain essential to making the European market more attractive, and thus to ensure the survival of our SMEs, which create so many jobs in our country. The purpose of a company is not to write reports, but to create value, whether in the form of goods or services. To achieve this, a company needs skilled and motivated staff. People trained here in Luxembourg, as well as talented people from abroad who are ready to contribute to our success. With this in mind, we will make targeted investments in vocational training. We will offer and recognize post-baccalaureate training in Luxembourg, and we will encourage companies to invest in their employees, in particular by improving apprenticeship allowances and developing skills bridge training. To attract foreign talent, new tax measures were introduced in January. Over the next 12 months. We will also define strategies to identify in a targeted manner the talents each sector needs. All these measures will enable us to create the right conditions for economic growth. Growth creates jobs. It provides the state with the revenue it needs to pursue a strong social policy and make essential investments in the energy transition, the digital future, and defense. But growth needs to be managed. Initiatives are therefore necessary in the areas of housing, mobility, and security. In order to build the necessary housing, we first had to contain the crisis in the construction sector. We achieved this through short-time working and targeted tax measures. Today, this crisis is behind us. It is not the state's role to support the housing market indefinitely. The market has to function on its own. That is why the government will phase out the temporary tax package. The tax credit on notarial instruments, Belgian Act, for primary residences at €40,000 will remain in place. That means that a couple that buys an accommodation of around €1 million for personal use does not have to pay registration fees. This measure helps young families to acquire their own home. We are committed to building more and faster. To achieve this, we have initiated a true paradigm shift in procedures last year. This is the way to boost the market in the medium term, while ensuring that everyone has access to affordable housing. With this in mind, reforms aimed at restoring the balance between housing needs and environmental protection were presented to Parliament in January, such as the principle of Naturerecht and the one-time compensation. Other important measures, such as the second phase of the silence means consent principle, the unified building standard, and the simplification of the PAGI and PAP procedures, will be introduced in the coming months. The government will also present its proposals for a mobilization tax on unused land within building zones before the summer, with the aim of encouraging construction on designated plots. In order to ensure mobility in line with population growth, we are continuing to invest in infrastructure. In rail, with major projects such as the Luxembourg-Bettembourg line and the new transport hub in Hollerich on the roads, with the completion of the bypass of Hosingen. In the tramway network, with financing laws for the extension of the Areler Struss and Escher Struss, and at the airport with the extension of the current terminal and the modernization of security checks to reduce waiting times. The rule of law must also adapt to changes in our society. Security is a fundamental prerequisite for the exercise of our freedoms, and sometimes a simple feeling of insecurity can be enough to restrict them. This is a question of respect for the law, respect for others, and for the rules that underpin our society. Without this, trust in the rule of law will diminish. To maintain this confidence, we need an effective and responsive judicial system and a police force that is responsive to citizens and their concerns. These are the requirements, and that is why they are the objectives of this government. To this end, the judiciary has been strengthened. Additional posts have been created and access to the judiciary has been broadened. The Minister of Justice also plans to make the recruitment of judges to the administrative courts more attractive and to adapt the training of judicial assistants. In addition to staffing, more efficient procedures are needed. Lengthy proceedings are detrimental to victims, the rule of law, and society as a whole. With this in mind, the digitalization of procedures will continue. We have already digitized communication between the judiciary and banks, as well as with member states. And from autumn onwards, a new software will enable better electronic processing of files. The police will also be given the necessary resources, whether in terms of staff, equipment, or powers. Recruitment will be maintained at a high level to ensure greater presence, proximity, and prevention. To this end, adjustments to the legislative framework are necessary, strengthening provisions relating to eviction measures, simplifying visible surveillance procedures, and creating a legal basis for a municipal police. These changes will be implemented in a targeted manner where appropriate. The aim is not to create a surveillance state in which citizens lose their right to privacy. In fact, the opposite is true. In some places, such as the quarter around the train station, the current situation restricts residents' freedom. Our aim is to guarantee everyone the right to move and live freely. These specific areas are particularly affected by drug-related crime. This issue needs to be addressed with all stakeholders as part of a balanced approach, combining law enforcement against dealers and social support for victims. It is well known that organized crime in Luxembourg often operates across borders in an attempt to evade justice. Recent operations against drug trafficking networks are proof of this. It is clear that Luxembourg is not the destination market for such quantities of drugs. And yet this is where they were seized. I would like to congratulate the police, customs, and judicial authorities for their excellent work and cooperation in these operations. The fight against cross-border crime requires cross-border cooperation, and we will strengthen this cooperation. This requires enhanced data exchange within the Schengen area. The government will also introduce an automatic number plate recognition system. This system, which already exists in many European countries, will help us identify wanted persons more quickly and bring them to justice. This cooperation is at the heart of the Schengen information system. Without Schengen, it would be impossible to fight crime effectively. Likewise, a strong economy cannot exist without the free movement of goods and services. But Schengen is much more than that. Schengen is a symbol of Europe and of our union. It is the tangible expression of a united Europe. For centuries, this was unimaginable on our continent. This summer will mark the 40th anniversary of the Schengen Agreement, and it is here, more than anywhere else, that what I said at the beginning of my speech rings true. Progress is never guaranteed. We have to work for it every day. In this spirit, Luxembourg will continue to work at European level to preserve the Schengen area and to support open internal borders. The problem of illegal immigration can only be solved at European level, with stronger controls at external borders. Migration policy must be based on humanity and reason. Inspired by the heart, guided by reason, the right to asylum must be guaranteed. It reflects our fundamental principles of humanity and openness. Furthermore, legal immigration is essential to maintaining our economic and social model in Europe. At the same time, illegal immigration must be tackled. And people entering Europe illegally must be expelled. This is also part of the rule of law. It is an essential requirement for successful integration. I am convinced that the people of Luxembourg want to help those fleeing war. The solidarity shown during the conflicts in Syria and Ukraine has clearly shown the human face of Luxembourg society. But if we overburden the system with people who do not meet the requirements to stay here, social cohesion is likely to suffer. Luxembourg cannot be accused of a lack of humanity. Our country already takes in one of the highest numbers of refugees in Europe, proportionally to its population. But our structures are also reaching their limits. Even if other structures are planned, we need a responsible migration policy with a clear, fair, and objective framework. Applicants who have a real chance of being granted refugee status must receive a swift response to avoid unnecessary frustration, and those who have no real chance of being granted refugee status must not be given false hope. In such cases, we take a humane approach. In this context, the Maison du Retour opened last September. It provides psychological and social support to help people return to their countries of origin in dignity and with prospects for a sustainable future. The numbers show that this approach is working. In the last 12 months, voluntary returns have outnumbered forced returns. Since the start of this government's term of office, the total number of returns of those who were unable to stay in the country has more than doubled compared to 2022. By implementing this policy, we are ensuring that the integration capacity of our society is not exceeded. Mr. President, peace, freedom, justice. These are fundamental principles cannot remain confined to history books. They are values that we must embody every day, ideals that we must defend relentlessly. Each generation must redefine these values. Previous generations fought for women's rights, and yet further steps were needed to strengthen them. That is what this government has done by banning virginity certificates and hymenoplasty, by increasing justice and protections for victims of violence and creating a dedicated national contact point, and by abolishing the mandatory reflection period before abortion in the first 12 weeks. The same will apply to all the values we hold dear. Our defense commitment and resilience strategy ensure peace and security. The deployment of renewable energies promotes sustainability. Innovation and entrepreneurship are creating wealth. Reconciling work and family life paves the way for greater choice and equality. Efforts to ensure a happy childhood and a dignified retirement help to strengthen equity in our society. All these concrete measures show that we have the means to shape reality and the world around us in line with our values. Through our actions and our decisions? That is what sovereignty is all about. The freedom to make your own decisions and shape your own future. That is what we want for our country. Progress is possible, but it does not just happen. All progress is the result of change. What we must avoid at all costs is standing still, paralyzed by the fear of change. In a democracy, all these changes give rise to discussion and debate. But it is not about imposing one's truth or discrediting the other. It is about moving the country forward together, with the general interest as our compass. We all have different opinions, perspectives, and visions, but let us work together in the interests of our country and its citizens. It is this dialogue, the willingness to look beyond differences of opinion and to work together. That is our country's strength. It is what makes us stand out internationally. It is what we call, quite simply, stability. That stability is the foundation of our progress. That is the conviction of this government. Progress through stability. Stability through progress. Yield the floor to the Prime Minister from his declaration and thank him for his remarks. Remarks that we will discuss further in the context of the debate on the state of the nation. You can now leave this session and return for the next plenary session. Once again, thank you for being present at the hearing on the state of the nation, where the Prime Minister will also be present.